We all remember these two vessels. They were once in Sail and Sink Simulator, but at some point they got removed. Today in this video, we're going to go into the story of the oil tanker and the tugboat. Two vessels that have got removed, but soon came back in much different ways. The classic tugboat made its home of that industrial island. However, at some point, it would no longer become its home, as it would end up meeting its end of its service. Originally meant for tugging vessels away from main island and out to open seas, the ship would be brought out for a final time. The ship began its final sail out of main island, where it would no longer return to main island. Unaware to them, they would be trailed by another ship and brought, and the tugboat itself would be brought somewhere far, far away. On August 8th, 2025, the tugboat would be brought to the ice wall, where a new tugboat would take its place. The new tugboat has taken the home of the original tugboat, and the classic tugboat would sit here at the ice wall, abandoned for months. However, that same day, it would not be alone. Another ship would join it. Just a day before the update was about to come out, a new oil tanker was to be brought to Industrial Island. Industrial Island didn't know what to do with the old one. But however, they had also agreed to do the same thing as that of Main Island. Bring the original oil tanker to the ice wall and abandon it there, in hopes that nobody finds these two vessels. On the same day that the oil tanker was to be retired, or at least has arrived, the classic oil tanker had been done with. And a day before the update officially came out, it joined the classic tugboat. The two ships just sat for months. They didn't move at all. They just sat by the ice wall, where they would remain. Unfortunately though, the worst would come in for one of them. During the storms and rescue update, or just a month before, the classic tugboat would have a fire happen aboard. The fire was caused, unfortunately, due to a faulty wire. What nobody knew was that the classic tugboat still had power going, while on the classic oil tanker, it had no power. And nobody knew that there was a fire happening on the classic tugboat, so it was left to burn, left behind to burn. No one was able to save it from the flames that lapped upon its parts, as it burned away each part and possibly made the ship's condition much worse. However, the fires wouldn't be able to spread to that of the oil tanker. But still, the tugboat would get worse. The fire had done its damage. The classic tugboat didn't even resemble much of its original self. Instead, a burnt husk of a ship, with its hull barely visible. Unfortunately, there was lower hull damage, but not really enough to bring the ship down. However, luck may be turning around for one of these ships. Unfortunately, said luck wouldn't be going with the classic tugboat, but instead the classic oil tanker. Just a week before the tugs and tanker update, Industrial Island realized it would need another tugboat, and they couldn't keep using the tugboat for Main Island, as Main Island needed that tugboat, since some ships have gotten delays. So they have decided an idea to go out towards the ice wall, where Main Island had left that of both of its classic tugboat, and where Industrial Island has left its original oil tanker. Traveling at 33 studs per second, the tow guard would be making its first voyage away from Industrial Island into the ice wall, where it would meet the predecessor of one of its ships, or at least a predecessor of the oil tanker. However, it would not see what would happen next involving the original tugboat. The crews arrive on the scene. They see one of the ships and the faint outline of another. Now, nobody knows exactly why this said event happens, at least involving the ice wall, of why it gets very foggy. But these crew members were told and informed of that beforehand. However, they were shocked to see what remained of the original tugboat. The tow guard, or at least its crew, were talking inside of the ship, or the own vessel, to wonder what could they do involved in the vessel. Once they reported what they seen back to Industrial Island, they have agreed on the following. Main Island would get paid an undisclosed amount of currency in the world called anchors. These small anchors were the size of a coin. Or, well, the size of a regular, something like a quarter or something else. Or some other coin the size of a quarter. However, the worst thing came in when they also learned about the damages. They worried about this, the ship possibly breaking up when they tried to tow her. But they knew they had to try. And that's exactly what they would do. The crews heard every creak and groan of the classic tugboat. But they knew they had to get the ship as quickly as they could back to Industrial Island, since now the classic tugboat was their property now. The ship finally, the classic tugboat finally leaves from that of the ice wall. However, its fate would not be that of being rebuilt. Instead, parts of it would be rebuilt, just not as its original self. It would be a much different vessel. It would still be a tugboat, but it wouldn't be a tugboat with its original looks. Instead, Industrial Island has a plan with what they could salvage from the ship. The tow guard returned with the burnt remains of the classic tugboat. However, the tugboat looked much different and gained both an identification and a new name. Its identification was HT-24 and its name was Fairwind. And just before the update will even come out, in the next 3 days, the original tanker would be brought back, but instead, it would get a much new look. The classic oil tanker was no longer the classic oil tanker anymore. The ship got a complete overhaul and got known as the coastal fuel tanker, to be at parts where the original oil tanker could not go. The ship got a whole new interior and got alterations to its engine room, along with that of industrial system pumps. As soon as these ships were made for the public during the Tugs and Tanker update, these ships would give their all, as if they were never removed from the game at all, removed from sailing any of their homes, except for that of the Fairwind. Its home is, well, now Industrial Island. And the vessels both still retain what their original purpose was. One to carry fuel and other stuff in its hull consisting of oil, and the other towing. But due to the Fairwind being there at Industrial Island, it gave the other tugboat some assistance. These two vessels were, in a way, glad to be in service again. And so were many others. While several crews would sail aboard these vessels, they were happy knowing that things from a time of when they were once in their prime was back in service. Hello, I hope you enjoyed this video involving involving both the classic oil tanker and the classic tugboat. Gotta admit, when I was playing this update, I didn't know exactly how these two would be until I finally got to, mess around with them myself after getting a whole bunch of anchors. Gotta admit, it's good to see these ships again in Sail and Sink Simulator. I hope you have a good day or good night, depends on what time you're watching this. Make sure to like and subscribe and use the hype tool. And don't forget to share the video as well. Bye!